Today we're going to the park that has 3 shuttle coasters.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no.
To review Psyké Underground, one of their 2 launched shuttle coasters, conveniently placed alongside each other, just like best pals. I would argue that Psyké probably is the most unique of the 3 shuttle coasters they have there, especially because it only has to compete with this, I don't even have to tell you what it is.
I'm getting really sick of you!
And then a Mach Power Splash, which are starting to appear several places around the world, where Psyké's race is fucking dying. It is known for its overhaul of both its ride system and its theme, but it's generally quite liked and seen as a pretty good coaster. I know some people that recently thought it was the best coaster at the park before a certain something got added, and I wrote it in July of 2022. So let's talk about some technical stuff.
Peter show wheel to people in town, but no one want wheel.
Psyké Underground is a Schwarzkopf Shuttle Loop. It's the flywheel iteration as well, although that name is no longer accurate.
So that was a fucking lie.
Currently, there are 5 of the Shuttle Loop model in operation, including this one, with this being the weirdo with an LIM launch instead of the classic wheel, although Montezuma's Revenge seems to be taking on that same trend. It opened in 1982, outside as well, whereas it's now in a big-ass tube, and it's got 28 rider trains over 14 rows. It's got some pretty decent comfort. I've always liked the comfort of these Schwarzkopf trains, as they have a pretty freeing lap bar, although the seats aren't anything special, but yeah, I like these. It's 137.8 feet tall. It is surprisingly tall, but it especially looks massive from the outside due to the building it's in. But of course, it's only 722 feet long. It's literally a straight line almost. You wouldn't expect this to be a long coaster. And it goes 53 miles an hour, nothing special, but a very solid speed, especially considering how simple the layout is. The ride duration is also only 28 seconds from the launch until it basically breaks. And it's got 1 inversion, but it does go through it twice.
What's in the fucking box?
Psyké Underground used to be an all-out queen. Now it's shy, hidden by some sort of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle artwork, which is pretty cool. It's definitely got this New York underground vibe, which makes a lot of sense for the theme. It's literally called Psyké Underground. We'll talk about the theming later, but for the presentation, it's hard to not fall in a bit of awe when looking at this. It's generally a really intriguing appearance that definitely makes you want to go over and see what the hell is this.
What's that? It's called the loop-de-loop.
This might be the shortest layout walkthrough I've ever done because of how short the ride is. Because you now have an LIM launch instead of a flywheel launch, you start by slowly creeping forward so that LIM can really grab onto you. Then when that LIM launch hits you, you get a pretty solid boost. However, it is not a very powerful launch. It is certainly in the weaker end of the launches I've done in general, and it was a little bit disappointing for me.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
I bet that when it had its cable launch, it was a pretty powerful launch. I'm sure people who have recently ridden Montezuma can vouch for that. But right now, it's just a decent launch. But of course, always fun, because launches are always fun. Then it goes straight into the loop, and this is a pretty damn awesome vertical loop. I'm sure a lot of people who've ridden Schwarzkopf loops know that they're pretty good because they're pretty forceful, but it can even be a little floaty at the top. Well, this one's just pretty damn forceful all the way through, while it's also in complete darkness, so it disorientates you quite a lot.
I can't see fucking shit out of this thing.
Then there's the first spike. Now this spike doesn't particularly do anything super special. It's okay, I guess. You might feel a little bit of weightlessness. Maybe if you're up all the way towards the front, you're actually gonna get some weaker floater airtime, but I never experienced anything like that. But then you go backwards again through the loop, once again really forceful, and while you don't have as much speed this time, because you're going backwards, it feels more intense and more disorientating. It's probably the most intense feeling part of the ride, going backwards through the loop, and it is pretty damn awesome. Then when you go through the station backwards, you immediately hit some trim brakes.
What the fuck?
They completely killed the vibe of this ride going up into the final spike, because you hit a shitload of trim brakes and they are so... You barely even make it up the final spike going backwards. You have to be all the way in the back to properly feel that spike, which I imagine isn't that interesting either. It's not the steepest thing in the world for a spike, and me personally, who sat in the middle, I only made it up a little bit of an incline before I then just roll slowly back into the station. It's a pretty sucky trim brake. But anyway, it's a pretty fun layout because of that loop, the launch, and the darkness especially.
What the hell? What the fuck?
Now, believe it or not, but there's actually something to talk about regarding pacing on this ride. I know, it surprised me too. Speed going forward, of course, is all fine and dandy. You definitely feel a lot of speed after that launch and a lot of intensity. The same thing for going backwards until you hit those trims. Fucking why? Congratulations, Dumbo, you gained the Buzzkill of the Year award. This is just a repetition of what I just said in the layout category because those trims completely murder the pacing, both regarding speed but also just interesting shit happening, or as El Toro Ryan would have said.
I'm as straight as an arrow.
Well, it's a ride with no turns, plus it's an old Schwarzkopf, so if you expect this to feel like a washing machine bombarded by rocks, you'd be wrong. It's pretty darn smooth. I didn't notice any rattle or shakiness or pretty much anything noteworthy on this ride regarding the lack of smoothness. There probably is a mild shuffling or vibrating on this ride, but it's minor to the point where it truly doesn't matter. I'd be surprised if you went off this ride in pain, and I'd also say you might have ridden Cobra by accident. It's a super smooth coaster. Remember that part in Scribblenauts Unlimited where you go into the underground and help band members play songs and shit? Yeah, that's this, with some Little Big Planet city vibes bombarded on top of it. It's got this awesome urban, underground, New York, Boston, etc. kind of theme. Outside, again, the theme is really cool looking, very complete. There's so many colors, and then when you go inside, there are so many colors, music. It's very much like you go into a club. The front car of the train is like a very cartoony taxi car. Kind of reminds me a lot of something from the band cartoons. And then when you go onto the ride itself, especially when you go through the loop and the first spike, there's just darkness with a shitload of strobe lights, which really boosts that disorientation that you get. Generally, this ride just gives fantastic underground party vibes. And the soundtrack is fire.
Psyké Underground.
I could blast that shit all day. Awesome theme, awesome vibes, makes this ride a lot more awesome than if it was just outside and still had that awful trim break.
Hey! You sexy dog.
Overall, I'd say this is a really cool ride. It draws you in quite intriguingly and is very exciting with the theming and the kind of ride that it is, along with the size of it. It definitely could have been and probably has been fairly better regarding the layout before that LAM launch and those breaks, but it still slaps. When it's fast and intense, it's really good, and it mixes so well with the theming to create an overall low-key, mind-blowing experience. It's a super fun ride to go on and have a blast with. My overall rating for this ride would be a 7.5 out of 10. Personally, it wasn't one of my favorites, but I still think it deserves a good score, especially because it stands out in the coaster collection of Walibi Belgium, which certainly isn't a small collection. Definitely excited to ride this again, especially because of that huge, powerful, and disorientating loop and the theming. I feel like I've repeated myself a lot by now, but there's so little on this ride to talk about, and I can't stop talking, I'm sorry.
Shut up, May!
Let me know what you think about Psyké Underground in the comments below, or any other shuttle loop for that matter. I'd love to hear your opinion on, I guess, anything, really. Talk to me in the comments, boys. Bye!